Thank you. Welcome, everyone. My name is Maureen Wilson, very proud to be your councillor representing Ward 1, the neighbourhood of Strathcona. We are here tonight to discuss the Complete Street Safety Study that was conducted in both Strathcona and Kirkendall. It's March the 2nd, 2026, so thanks for joining us on this cool evening. The City of Hamilton is situated upon the traditional territories of the Erie, Neutral, Huron-Wendat, Haudenosaunee, and Mississaugas. This land is covered by the Dish with One Spoon Wampum Belt Covenant, which was an agreement between the Haudenosaunee and the Anishinaabeg to share and care for the resources around the Great Lakes. We further acknowledge that this land is covered by the Between the Lakes Purchase 1792 between the Crown and the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation. Today, the City of Hamilton is home to many Indigenous peoples from across North America, and we recognize that we must do more to learn about the rich history of this land so that we can better understand our roles as residents, neighbors, partners, and caretakers. Joining me from the City of Hamilton in the Public Works Department, the Transportation Division, is Mike Field, the Acting Director of Transportation, Kurt Milligan, the Manager of Transportation Operations, and Michael Turco, the Acting Superintendent of Roadway Safety. And I'm going to hand it off to these folks to get us started.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Mike Field, as the councillor just introduced me. I'm the Acting Director of Transportation. My home position is the Manager of Transportation Operations, which is all things traffic. So for tonight's agenda, I'll just briefly go over. I'm going to do a walkthrough of the study, providing some background as to the history of what led up to the study, how it was conducted, and then finally what the findings are from that study. And then we will review next steps and then have a piece of tonight's town hall for questions and answers. Part of the key thing that you'll hear tonight is a reference to complete streets. And just for the purposes of today's meeting, the question is, what is a complete street? A complete street is not, in essence, what its name necessarily implies. Complete street is a street that delivers all of the needs for users and residents based on its use. I'll give an example. If you're familiar with Burlington Street, for example, in the industrial part, that street's meant to move a lot of heavy vehicles, trucks, and that sort of thing. So the street is built to accommodate those needs on that type of street. So typically on that type of street, you wouldn't see a lot of pedestrian and cyclist accommodations because the main purpose of that street is to move traffic, especially heavy vehicles. Conversely, on a local street, we don't want to have big trucks on local streets. So the composition of a local street looks differently, where the primary users of a local street would be residents who live there, whether they're driving or walking or cycling. So the street should be constructed in a way that would support those modes of transit or transportation, and then would actually reduce the ability for uses of that street to not be able to use it, such as not being able to fit a giant truck down a local roadway. So in essence, a complete street is a street that serves the purpose of a street that it's intended to do. The other thing for tonight is Vision Zero. And if you're not familiar with Vision Zero in the City of Hamilton, it's a way of thinking. Council approved the Vision Zero plan back in 2019. Vision Zero looks at roadway safety in the city and recognizes that injury and fatal collisions are preventable, and that we work towards the goal with what we do within the roadway safety team to eliminate those types of collisions from occurring. Just briefly, the way that Vision Zero approaches things compared to how we have traditionally approached things is slightly different. As you see the graphic up on your screen, I won't go through all of it, but some of the key things is traditionally we would expect humans to behave perfectly, that they wouldn't make mistakes, and that they would interact with the roadway with perfect behavior. We know that that's not true. People make mistakes. So when we design roadways nowadays, we want to have some flexibility or some buffer within those designs to allow for people to make mistakes, and when they make those mistakes, that it doesn't result in their injury or death. The other piece that I'll point out is the individuals are responsible. That's how we used to think of things, where We may solely look at an individual as causing a collision or being the solution to a collision. The new way of thinking with the Vision Zero approach is that it's a shared responsibility, that everyone plays a role with keeping themselves safe, but also lots of different individuals work together to keep the city safe. That responsibility is not equal across all road users, and Vision Zero recognizes that in the sense that if you're driving a vehicle, you have a larger responsibility to keep people safe, yourself safe, and safety of other road users, other drivers, but the safety of pedestrians and cyclists. Because when they're struck by a vehicle, they are injured more often than not. So the responsibility for drivers is higher to maintain safety than, say, a vulnerable road user being a cyclist or pedestrian. So that kind of leads us to the Ward 1 Complete Streets study. And we work very closely with the Ward 1 office. And through the work that we've been doing with the Ward office, there was a thought to bring forward a complete street study, which is a comprehensive review of the ward. And that's what has led to this assignment and the recommendations within this assignment. To achieve that project, or to undertake that project, we use a consulting firm called Dillon Consulting, and they undertook the review of Ward 1 and created the report that we're going over today. That's really looking for solutions to neighborhood safety, not necessarily safety of arterial and main roadways within the ward, but more of local roadways, collector roadways. And those solutions we're really looking for ones that can reduce traffic speeds within residential neighborhoods, enhance public spaces, and then improve road safety for all users. And that's fitting around that Vision Zero philosophy that I just mentioned as well. So this is a map of the study area within Ward 1. It includes the Strathcona, Kirkendall North, and Kirkendall South neighborhoods that you can see. And then I just mentioned it has an emphasis on local and collector roadways and not arterial roadways. The reason why this study doesn't really look at those more major roadways is because within the roadway safety realm, we look at those roads very frequently, but we don't get opportunities to dig down into neighborhoods as frequently. So there's other mechanisms that kind of review those major roadways and look for roadway safety improvements or enhancements on those major roadways. And this is a process going through this ward complete street study is looking at those neighborhood streets, all of the streets within those, the network of those major streets. So the key features of the ward, I'm sure all of you are familiar with it, but it has, a cluster of educational institutions, a number of elementary schools in the area, which are, big generators for vulnerable road users, especially obviously children that want to walk and bike to school, which really reinforces, the need or the desire to enhance safety for them. And there's a lot of parks within the ward as well that also attract a variety of different users to them, whether they're getting there in their car or walking or cycling or what have you. So back in 2023, in the fall, this process was started. The councillor put forward a motion at Public Works Committee to undertake the study to begin with. And then we started that work, as I mentioned, engaging with a consulting firm to help with that assignment. And the very first thing that they did was they started to review the existing conditions within the ward, and they were gathering stakeholder feedback. Stakeholders are both internal to the city, so my own team within the transportation division, within other teams within the city, let's say with HSR, the planning divisions, engineering divisions, all contributing some information to the existing conditions piece of it, and then external stakeholders, which the largest one, the most important one, is the public. And that led to the very first Public Information Center, PIC #1. If you attended it, thank you. And that was held in person, and it was really an opportunity to share kind of the details of the study, why it was being undertaken, reviewing some of a lot of the content that I just went over. But the most important thing, looking for feedback from the public. That feedback, what we asked for at that moment was what's happening on your street, in your neighborhood? What are the concerns that you have related to public safety or your experience as a resident? That's really important information to give to us, but also the consultant, so that they could start working with that information, gathering it, and looking for trends and areas that they want to dig into. Moving into Q2 of 2024, based on all of the feedback that was gathered, the consultant started looking at what are the problem statements, what are the opportunities, which I have on the next slide of what that came to be. And then they moved into, once they understood the problem or we defined the problem and opportunity, what those options to resolve those issues or address those issues would be. Once that was finished, we held PIC number 2 in Q4 of 2024. And at that PIC, we presented the preliminary recommendations or the countermeasures or of all the mitigating measures that we came up with, or the consultant came up with, responding to all of that great input that we received from the public along the way. That Public Information Center was then presented in person again, and we were looking for feedback from the public as to your thoughts about those possible solutions. That information was provided to the consultant, or the consultant took that away and made some alterations to their recommendations, and helped refine the outcomes of the ultimate study to make sure that it met kind of the expectations of the residents and listened to the message from the residents, so that at the end of it, we had a very resident-driven report with recommendations that support enhancements within the neighborhoods that are addressing concerns that were brought forward. We have the draft study was prepared, and we did a lot of internal work to review that draft study, not only internally to our own team, but with our stakeholders within the city, and then also with the ward office. And just recently, towards the end of last year, we worked with the councillor's office to finalize that report, and we issued the final report just very recently. The next steps from there is, once the report is finished, the most important thing, the best part of it, is actioning all of the recommendations from within the report. And we'll go over a bit of that today about what it may look like with the next phases. These types of reports do create recommendations in the short, medium, and long-term context. Short-term meaning measures that we can implement as a city very quickly and without a lot of expense. And then as we climb from medium to long term, those are getting more complicated and more expensive to implement. And therefore, they're defined as ones that are going to take a little bit longer than the short-term ones. So just a review of that public engagement PIC number 1 that we held. It was back in December of 2023. We had about 370 comments, either in person at that PIC or online. And we just have a screenshot of an online tool that you would have found on Engage Hamilton, where you could pin a location within your neighborhood and highlight to us the types of issues that you're worried about. So this is a screenshot back from close to December 12th, 2023, and you can see the circles marking some of the comments that were received through that online tool. Heading into PIC number 2, and again, that is the one after we had heard back all of the comments from the public, and the consultant had taken those away and started formalizing or coming up with some ideas to mitigate the concerns, or come up with strategies to deal with the number of issues that were identified through PIC number 1. PIC number 2 was held in person in October of 2024. And we had 233 comments, again, either in person to that PIC or online through the Engage Hamilton tool. Again, and you can see some of the dots. These aren't all the dots. So if you go on the Engage Hamilton tool today, you'll see these maps still exist, and they have the collection of all of the dots from PIC 1, 2, and then we continue to accept comments from the public even after these PICs to make sure everyone had an opportunity to provide input. I think collectively we had, I just did the math today, around 600 comments from the public received. That's a very good turnout. That tells me that the residents care a lot about their neighborhoods and they have a lot to say. And when we receive that many comments, I think that that is most helpful um, to really help guide where the consultant and where we need to focus. And I say it quite often, the counselor can attest to this, but no one knows what's happening on someone's street better than the people that live there. So we never want to pretend that we know your neighborhood better than you do. And that's why that feedback piece is so central to this type of work. So within the final report itself, which will be made public, you'll find it in the same place that you find all of the other work along the way, which is the Engage Hamilton website. And then there's also a web page for the City of Hamilton. The final report will be posted there soon after this meeting in the next few days. But just for a screenshot of the table of contents of this report so you can see how it's constructed. It provides a summary of everything that the journey that we've gone along since the beginning with the purpose and the scope. It has the information that was received during the public information centers, so that's captured. And then it has some hardcore technical information if you like reviewing that, collision analysis, speed analysis, data, um, a lot of the reviews. And we also undertook a walk around with the counselor's office once we kind of had some of the possible mitigating measures just to walk around and look at them in person together. Um, I should have mentioned that you'll see in that section 4.0, there was a lot of data analysis that was conducted as part of this project, looking at our traditional collision databases, but we also did speed analysis to assist with the study. So if you had concerns about speeding on your street, it's likely that we went out there and measured the speeds. Um, we also measured volumes and turning movements of vehicles and that sort of thing, pedestrians and cyclists, so that we could have that hardcore data to help inform some of the outcomes. And then finally, section 6 there are the recommendations, which is the most important part of the report at this stage, since that is cataloging all of the recommendations that we're going to be working on actioning as a municipality going forward. So as I mentioned, one of the first things we did after we collected all of the data from that PIC, number one, we heard back from the residents was what is the issue, and then what are the opportunities related to what that issue may be. And I just brought up onto the screen what that was back at the time that kind of drove or grounded the consultant in their work and us as well. And you can see that one of the comments was, or common theme was concerns about safety on the streets that connect them or you to your neighborhoods. And you want residential streets that encourage and enable walking, cycling, and safe connections. And that the complete street study aims to address safety concerns and help support the needs of people who call these communities home. So that was the problem and opportunity statement that was used for this project. So some more information in terms of what we did with all of the comments that we received after screening the comments. We categorized them into themes. You can see within the image on the screen, there's some categories there and color coding. So we wanted to look for themes and trends so we could really zero into some possible solutions that this study would bring recommendations for. You can see the 84 concerns that we kind of compiled. They were related to accessibility, active transportation facilities, crossings of roadways, cut through traffic, safety, sightline speed, and stop sign compliance. That's not all of them, but that's a portion of the ones that we'll just highlight for you this evening. So on to the good stuff. The recommendations in the study itself. So you can see this is one of the summary tables within the study outlining the measures, the recommendations, and the related measures that are within that final study. And you can see them broken down into the short term, medium term, and long term. And just for reference, on the left-hand side, you'll see kind of the time-based component of what those are. So short term, we would want to do within 1 to 2 years of finalization of the study, and medium term, 2 to 4 years, and the long term are 5+ years. And then you have the tally of how many recommendations are related to each one of those three tiers there, with short term having 25, medium term 27, and long term 15. And just to reiterate, the short term ones are uh, uh, typically a collection. So if you look at an example, the very first one are bollard installations, with two of those for their signage upgrades. Three locations, or the big one, 10 recommendations for speed cushions. So those are measures, like I mentioned, that we can implement relatively quickly with little cost, and those are built in the short term with that 1 to 2 year in mind. So if you move over to the medium term, you'll see some more complicated measures in there. I'll just pick on maybe intersection narrowing, where it requires some physical modification for a roadway. That takes a bit more time to do because we need some factor of engineering design and then possibly some construction to occur. So that's the medium term with 2 to 4 years, because it takes us some time to plan those out and get them built. And then the long term, those are the most complicated ones. So I'll just use one of the examples, that a raised intersection. So that's really speaking of recommendation. That's the complete reconstruction of intersection, where we're lifting the entire intersection up from being at the road level to the intersection being raised to more of the sidewalk level, so that when vehicles approach it, they have to kind of go up on a hump like a speed cushion. But also for pedestrians, it's kind of a seamless transition from a sidewalk to cross the road at that intersection, because they're all at the same level. They don't have to, step down from a curb onto the road and then back up again. So for Strathcona, the short-term changes, there's some examples on your screen. There's 20 plus recommendations for short-term. So these are kind of narrowing down into some of the actual streets and what those recommendations are for those streets. The very first one on Baker Street, you can see that a concern was brought up related to cut-through traffic, where vehicles are using that street that aren't necessarily local traffic, and they're using it for a shortcut through the neighborhood or what have you. And noting that when Dundurn Street is backed up, that cars, when they want to go over to King Street, that they're using Baker Street as that cut through. So we want to try to stop that from occurring. And the recommendation within the report are some speed cushions in front of 19 Baker Street. Speed cushions really do a bunch of things. You may think that it's really related to trying to slow down vehicles. That is one of the primary things that they do, but they also make it inconvenient for cars to drive along the street. So when someone's making a choice to use it as a cut through, they're less likely to use a street that has speed cushions on it, because it's less convenient for them than a street without speed cushions. So maybe I'll just go down. I'll choose another street here to Napier Street at Pearl Street, about midway down. And we have a concern about stop sign compliance, and there's an always stop at that intersection. Much like a lot of stop signs in the city, compliance sometimes can be an issue, and always stops are not observed in that location. So we have some simpler interventions there that we want to reinforce the stopping at that intersection by painting, putting down some pavement markings and crosswalk markings to really reinforce that we really want drivers to stop at that location, and that that pedestrians may be present The crosswalk markings also provide some guidance, obviously, for pedestrians to really know that there's safe crossing points for them. Maybe the last one I will, or just pick just another speed cushion one. How about the very last one, Tecumseh Dundurn Castle, which is on a following slide. There was an accessibility concern about the south sidewalk. It drops off at the end of Tecumseh. If you're familiar with that, Tecumseh is a dead-end street and it leads into Dundurn Park. And the sidewalks, there are no sidewalks continuing into that piece of the dead-end street. So that recommendation has a couple things going on with it, but it's about extending the pedestrian realm to continue through either sidewalk extension or some curb cut alignments to deal with that issue. So when you have a chance to look at the final version of the study, if you haven't seen them before, this is a screenshot of the short-term measures in one section. And then if you have seen the previous versions of that were shown publicly at PIC1 and PIC2, they're very similar to these graphics too. So we have a legend that identifies the recommended measure, and then that symbol is placed on the map where those measures are planned to be. And there's a corresponding map or graphic for short-term. This is the medium-term one. And then I'll go to the long-term measure. So you just have to obviously match up the symbol with the street of interest that you're looking for, and then it provides kind of what is planned for that from a graphical standpoint. There's also a within the study itself too, more of a fulsome breakdown into, sorry, I'll just go back one slide here, of what those measures are. So if you wanted to know, sorry, the details of Lamoureux Street, which is looking for a few things on it, we'll just look at that one. There's some road maintenance concerns that are recommended within the report to deal with some, I believe, pavement issues, but there's also a recommendation related to some cycling facilities on that roadway. So within the report, you could look up the Lamoureux Street, and there would be a table kind of detailing the issues that were expressed there, and then what the solutions for that particular road would be. So it's not just a graphical representation of it. So the next steps from here, as I mentioned, the short term are the quick and easy wins. And those are the ones that we initially focus on for these types of reports. So we're going to be continuing forward with implementing those short-term measures. The springtime brings the speed cushion, start of the speed cushion season. So that's when speed cushions will be beginning to be installed once the season allows us to do. The Ward 1 councillor, we just held a meeting very recently. Councillor Wilson has gone through all the recommendations, and she is going to be bringing forward a motion to Public Works Committee to financially support some of these initiatives. The funding for the recommendations of the report come from a different variety of sources, and one of them is from the ward office themselves. So they often, or Councillor Wilson wants to invest in roadway safety within her ward, so she'll be doing that through some motions and some other work with us. We also fund many of these recommendations ourselves as part of the roadway safety program. And then the one thing that we try to do as much as possible is couple the recommendations in this report with other planned works. So, for example, on Lamoureux, I'm not saying that it's exactly the case, but say we're planning capital reconstruction of Lamoureux, we would want to couple all of the recommendations from this report onto that reconstruction project so that we get in there and we rebuild the street once and we put all those measures together. So there's different ways that we fund these, and that also governs the ability for us to implement them. So if there's a planned project, it may mean that we might wait a little bit for, say, a short-term measure to be done. Um, However, we're having a conversation internally about is it better to do it now or wait for that planned project to happen. In some cases, it could advance a long-term item that says 5+ years if there's a full reconstruction planned on a roadway that's identified sooner than 5 years, then we would build those measures earlier than 5 years. So the medium-term and long-term recommendations will be integrated into those planned projects where possible, like I mentioned. And if there's no planned projects, that doesn't mean that they're not going to happen. That just means that they're going to be standalone initiatives that we'll do on our own. And then that report will be used to guide, or sorry, the final report will be used to guide future analysis and interventions, including design, preparation, implementation, recommendations. I think is really, really important piece of it. Those recommendations might change as time goes on, as we implement them or integrate them into other projects. So we may find that the location that had recommended raised intersection, for example, we may find that there's some drainage issues that we can't deal with a raised intersection. And we may want to alter the recommendation slightly to have something different to maintain drainage in the area, but we still use the essence or the objective of that measure to, no matter what we put in place, that is really being maintained as far as what the objectives are. The way that we deliver it might change from what the report shows. Then the one thing that I always like to mention is roadway safety is not a static exercise. Just because we have this report doesn't mean that we stop here and we kind of stamp the moment in time and saying forever in a day forward, we're just going to rely on this report to guide things moving forward. We recognize that things change through the community and the built environment, and that we need to respond to those types of things in a very progressive manner, in that we're always looking at how things are evolving, and we'll use this information as a point of reference. But as time goes on, if, say, your street did not include a recommendation for it, and we see issues continue to persist or new things happen, then we would look at that and we would provide some interventions at that point in time. It's not that we wouldn't do anything. So I know that was short and sweet, but I just wanted to provide an overview of the final report. And as I mentioned, the report itself you can get your hands on through the Engage Hamilton website in a few days when it's posted, and you can leaf through that all on your own and really dig into the details of the parts of the ward that you have a deep interest in. And as time goes on, I'm sure the counselor and us will be providing updates as we move forward with the implementation stages of the project, and you will start to see many of the recommendations that are put forward in this study showing up on the streets within the Ward 1 neighborhoods.
I'm going to start with a question. You mentioned it at the beginning of the presentation, but where will the full report be located once once the web team is able to get it up?
The hamilton.ca website, you can search for Ward 1 Complete Streets or Strathcona or Kirkendall Complete Streets report. And that will bring you to either the project webpage or the Engage Hamilton page, which both of them will direct you to a link where you can download the report all on your own. There's some past versions of the report on the website today that were used as part of PIC number 1 and PIC number 2 that you can also look through. There's a lot of information still on there too from the project as it made its way from its journey from the beginning to the end too, that you may want to re-review.
Great. Next question. Is the city moving to no right-hand turns on red, on wider streets such as York, at Hess and King and Dundurn, cars can't see pedestrians, and this person has almost been hit in both locations. Recognizing these are major arterials and weren't in scope, it's still a good question to hear about how you were looking at right turns.
I'm happy to answer that question. Um, we, I'm just remembering back to last year at Public Works Committee. We presented a report to committee about the expanded use of no turn on red, because in the city of one-way streets we also have left-hand turns and right-hand turns. So we have no right turn on red, no left turn on red prohibitions across the city. We have an intent to expand the use of those, and we came up with a guideline to help frame where we would be implementing those types of measures in the city. If you're familiar with Main Street and King Street, there's quite a few turn restrictions across that corridor that were implemented sometime around 2022, 2023 as the immediate safety interventions for those two streets. And they make a big difference. And they're really meant for two things. Where there's sightline issues, say buildings are close up to the back of the property, there's not a lot of sightline issues. We want to use those types of prohibitions because drivers won't be able to see around the corner. And then we also use them where there's a high amount of pedestrians, or likely to be a lot of pedestrians in the area, to make sure that they are not getting into conflict or not being encroached upon by drivers. So we will be using them more frequently across the entire city, and that framework that was brought to council provides kind of the guidance on how we're going to be doing that.
Mike, you may want to go, if you could, to the one concept screen where it's showing Tecumseh.
Okay.
There it is.
I'm
sharing
it. There we go. I must have skipped right over this slide, so my apologies, everyone.
So the question is, is the person asking the question correct to believe that the sidewalk intervention is meant to be on the north side of Tecumseh and not the south side? And the answer is no, it is meant to be on the south side, though you can't see it in this concept driving, because the goal is to bring this section connected into the Aziz section, and then create a decent sidewalk on the south side that takes you directly into a path on the thing. So the question was, they thought it should be on the north side. We're saying no, it is on the south side, because this will be a grassy park section.
Yep, that's right. And we've actually progressed some conversations since this report has been finalized just as recently as last week, about closing off that dead end piece of Tecumseh and repurposing it from what at one point in time was a roadway that led into Dundurn Park into something that is more suitable for that area. And in this image, you can see that it's being converted from an old roadway into green space through a closure.
And so the north side will have a crossing onto the south side on the west side of Tecumseh based on this thing. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. I hope that's helpful. Separately, because we skipped over this, can you speak to Oxford Street a little bit?
Yes, Oxford Street. Sorry, there's a diagram here. Oxford Street was showed up within the study, and you can see that within the image that let me just see if can you see my cursor by chance on the screen?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. So there's some proposed curb extensions or narrowing of the intersection of Oxford Street and York Boulevard to ensure that when vehicles are making turns, that they are doing it at a reasonable speed, but also that we're shortening the crossing distance of pedestrians crossing within the crosswalk itself. And those are proposed on both sides of Oxford Street. This is obviously the opposite side. And then within the actual length of the street, there's a recommendation for having alternate on-street parking. So you can see the red lines are representing a parking prohibition and the green lines are permitted parking. So you can see that it alternates from one side of the street to the other as you go down the length of the street. That's creating some chicane effect down the street, as one side will have parked cars and then it won't have, and it's forcing vehicles to drive a little bit slower through that segment. That's a form of or a method of traffic calming that is used and is recommended for Oxford Street.
And just clarifying, the first question was, were the large streets looked at during this, like York, King, Main? And the answer is no, this was strictly residential and collector. Those are, as you mentioned earlier, if you want to, just in case this person wasn't present at that time, can you tell them how you look at the larger arterial and minor arterials?
Yep, I'm happy to. This project really focused on the neighborhood streets, so the local roadways and the collectors. Normally, the roadway safety team, we spend a lot of time looking at the major streets within the city, and a lesser amount of time looking at the local streets. So the complete street study is providing a focus on those neighborhood streets, and our normal day-to-day is looking at those arterials. So they weren't included within the scope of this assignment. As that wasn't the purpose of it.
Mentioned that they don't see any modal filters. Right now, the one that we do have is on Breadalbane, but no additional ones were recommended in this study from the consultants at this time.
That's correct. No modal filters recommended.
General question is, why do we allow rights on reds anywhere?
Why do we allow rights on reds anywhere? That's a good question. I think it's safe in certain circumstances to allow rights on red. I like using the example of a rural intersection, that it's a rural signalized intersection where there's no sightline issues, there's no pedestrians, that sort of thing. From a safety perspective, right turn on red is a permitted movement, and there's no real safety concerns with that type of setting. But it gets more complicated, obviously, within the downtown settings, as I mentioned, with sightline issues, but also pedestrians and cyclists being present too. It's part of the function of the transportation network to allow vehicles some degrees of movement through intersections from an efficiency standpoint. But of course, the principles of Vision Zero, but also the guidelines that we just brought forward, really make sure that safety is of the paramount decision factor, and that vehicle movements is a secondary consideration to that. So we'll only allow vehicle movements when we believe that it's safe to do so, and then where it's not, we would put in those types of turn restrictions.
Just a comment that from the same fella that as you mentioned, you're not talking rural route here. You gave that as an example as the best case scenario, but here you recognize there's more conflicts and challenges. But he is of the opinion that there should not be any rights on red. It is a Vision Zero, not Vision Some. And so I think we appreciate that. You in particular appreciate that statement, as you've been very clear on Vision Zero within the city. From your perspective.
Yep. I like the question, and it was one that council asked us as well to look at putting no turn on red restrictions citywide. And we have a full report on it if you're interested in reading it, that kind of talks about the ins and outs as to why they're used or not used, which goes into a level of detail that I can't provide this evening, but I think if you were to Google no right turn on red City Hamilton, it'll pull up those that report for you.
So that is it for questions this evening, Michael.
Well, very good.
Thank you. Thanks for all the questions and the comments. Appreciate it. Thank you for sharing this part of the evening with us. Strathconans love their neighborhood. I love the neighborhood of Strathcona, and really appreciate your advocacy and your concern for your family, yourself, and your neighbors. Thank you very much, everyone. Thank you again to city staff and Mike's leadership